Say amen if you are as glad as I am that a baby can cry in this church building. Thank God for a baby that cries. Thank God for the little ones. You realize if there were none of them that this church would be out of business in another generation. Thank you so much. I will be in the second chapter of Exodus. Exodus meaning to go out. Over a doorway in a public building you will see exit, meaning to go out. Exodus chapter 2. The Israelites had been 400 years in Egypt. They were slaves, they were abused, they were afflicted, and their exodus was about to come about. Charles Swindoll, whom I mentioned earlier with Courtney, wrote a book about Moses 5 years ago. And in this book, he makes an interesting illustration for us about the life of Moses. The life of Moses is divided into 3 segments, each of which are 40 years. In the first segment, he thinks he's somebody till he's 40 years old. In the second phase of his life, out in the desert being taught by God, all alone with God in the wilderness, he learns that he is nobody. And in the third phase of the life of Moses, he who thought he was somebody learned that he was nobody. In the deliverance of the children of Israel from Egypt and their sojourn in the Sinai Peninsula, Moses learned what God can do with a nobody. Now, we don't all live 120 years. We don't have 3 segments of our life that are 40 years. But I believe we all go through these phases. You're young and you really think you're somebody. And then reality creeps in and you find really you're nobody. But then the best phase of all is to discover that God can and will use you in his life. The life of Moses begins in the second chapter of Exodus, and I read from verse 1 and following. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. We know from Exodus chapter 6:20, by the way, that the daddy's name is Amram and the mother's name is Jochebed. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, King James says a goodly child. The Message says a special child. The New International Version says a fine child. The New American Standard Bible says a beautiful child. When she saw that he was a fine, beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes, daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister, Miriam, in her teens, a teenager, older sister. His sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river. And while her young women walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child. And behold, the baby, like yours, was crying. She took pity on him. This is one of the Hebrews' children. She would have known that because the baby, male, would have been circumcised. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." Now, every parent, I believe, that's a real parent, believes their child's beautiful. Sometimes you stand there in a hospital, look through the glass, and you say, "Beautiful? I don't know." Well, it's a baby. That's your only response you can make. But to that parent that loves, that parent that went through pain, that parent that went through suffering, that mother, for her, that child is beautiful. But I think the phrase means more than that in this passage. I think that when Jochebed looked into the eyes of little baby Moses, she saw in him something no one else could see. She saw a potential there. She saw a beauty there that the world would not notice. The Egyptians would not notice. Now, the Egyptians had made a decree. Because they felt threatened by the Israelites who were prospering and growing in the land of Goshen, the most fertile part of the Nile Valley, they were threatened by the Israelites, so they said, "Well, we'll just take care of that. If it's a girl, she can live. But if it's a male, you drown him in the Nile River." You've done real well keeping that child quiet, Veronica, thank you. But can you imagine hiding that baby? Sometimes I drive up to Dan and Veronica's driveway and I can hear the baby outside. You can't hide a baby for very long. The secret is going to be out. Jochebed put her life at risk for her babe. And if you think about it, every mother in this place, every mother that you had, may she rest in peace if demised, or if she is alive, may she be well and frisky like David's mother is. But every mother put her life at risk to give you life. She could have died, and some have. But Jochebed deliberately made a decision to put her life at risk because the government had said male boys of the Hebrews will be decimated. They will be exterminated. This was the Hitler in the days of Exodus. And she made a choice of civil disobedience. She didn't know if the Egyptians had search warrants to come into their houses and look. But she knew that it was coming to a point where she had to do something with this baby. He could not be hidden any longer. And so she, who put her life at risk, now uses her love that is resourceful. I don't know how long it would take you to make a basket. June and I have a friend in Marksville, this dear lady. She's of the Indian descent, and she makes baskets out of pine needles. She can make baskets and bowls and cups and things, but it takes her so long to do it. It takes a tedious work to weave that together. Oh, the love that went into preparing that little bassinet that would float on the water. She daubs it with tar and with pitch. And it was no accident where she placed the baby. I think she knew the habits of Pharaoh's daughter. I think she knew where Pharaoh's daughter often came to cleanse herself in the Nile River. After all, the Egyptians worshipped the Nile as a god. And she didn't just put the baby in the basket and push it out into the river and let the current take it. No, she was very careful where she placed that bassinet. A very deliberate placement. You see, you can have faith in God, and she did, but not a foolish faith. Your faith in God uses good sense too. Your faith in God means that you start thinking about how to do something. And I believe that she was led of God to prepare that little basket, to place that baby at the very place she knew he could be found. And she's smart enough to take her teenage daughter, Miriam, and put her there. She's hiding behind the bush rashers because she's watching. And I can imagine that Jochebed trained and rehearsed her daughter how to act, would be very careful, act like it's a big surprise. Just off the cuff, just out of the clear blue sky, offer to find someone to nurse the baby. All of this is planned ahead of time. And so when the baby is found by Pharaoh, through the resourcefulness of this mother who risked her life, Miriam steps forward. Can I help you, Your Highness? Now, we have seen the Time magazine cover, have we not? That this woman is breastfeeding her child who is like 4 years old, and we're kind of shocked at that. Oh, well, listen, folks, this is America. That's the way it's been done all over the world for centuries. That's the way it was done back then. It was not unusual to wean a child, or to have a child weaned at 3 or 4 or even 5 years of age. That was acceptable. That was the norm. That's the way it was done. And I believe that this was in God's plan too. Because when Miriam goes back and not accidentally chooses the mother of Moses to be the nurse of Moses, nursing in that day and age meant you gave loving care to that baby for 3, 4, or 5 years. And if you can have the first preschool years with that baby, you can implant so much truth, so much knowledge, so much of God. So you see how God is using all of this. This lady who risked her life, her love was resourceful, and now she reveals to a little infant boy, a child boy, the things of God that when he was a grown man, he never forgot. And when you have a grown child that becomes a man or a woman, if you have implanted the revelation of God into their little young lives, you can be sure that the Bible says when they're old, they will not depart from it. And Moses did just that. He came back and delivered the people. And here's the beautiful part. Pharaoh's daughter said, I'll even pay her to nurse the child. What pay do you give a mother for bringing up a child? What pay do you give a mother for risking her life to bring a child into the world? What pay can you give mother who used her smarts, her intelligence, her resources to give you a good start in life? May God bless the Jochebeds of today.